Hello and welcome to today's training video on SourceData. My name is Michael Nelson and I'm the Senior Product Specialist for LexisNexis Regulatory Compliance. For those people who are already familiar with the content that LexisNexis Regulatory Compliance provides, they'll understand that the content, generally speaking, is obligation-centric, in as much as when you're looking at the content, whether it's the practical guidance or the consequences or the remediation fields, all of that content is informed to a greater or lesser extent by a variety of different compliance sources or aspects of those compliance sources that talk specifically to that particular obligation. In response to requests from primarily the financial services sector, we have extended and enhanced the content that we provide through the medium of what you can see on the screen, SourceData. What SourceData does is fundamentally change the relationship that you have with the content that we provide, moving it from that one-to-many approach with an obligation at the center and many compliance sources talking to it, to what we call a many-to-many approach that allows you to view the content through a variety of different lenses, whether it's a particular module, whether it's a particular act or rule or regulation, or even, as you can see on the screen, to a particular regulator. What this means is that organizations who are familiar with looking at content through the lens of a particular act or a particular regulation can see the scope of their subscription mirrored against this particular lens. So for today's purposes, we'll look at something like the Anti-Money Laundering Act. So we'll type in the filter here. We'll look at the jurisdiction, Australia, because obviously we have content in a variety of other jurisdictions, and it's Commonwealth legislation. So we'll look at all of the states, including Commonwealth, that's caught in that. From there, what we can see is all of the acts, the principles, the amending regulations and the instruments that respond to this particular search term. In this particular case, the Anti-Money Laundering and Counterterrorism Financing Act 2006. So let's dive into that, and you can see further what SourceData can do for you. At once you could see the regulators that oversee this particular act. AUSTRAC on the one hand, and the Department of Home Affairs on the other. From there, we can scroll down to see which particular obligations are informed by the Act. But more than that, the metadata in the content that allows you to identify which particular regulator is relevant to a particular piece of legislation. You can also see the metadata allows you to search by particular parts. Part 1, obviously the introduction, is caught in the overview and the obligation around operating as a financial services provider. And further to that, the sub-obligation, complying with AML financing requirements. Part 2 is picked up in obligations around operating as a financial services provider again, but also looking at customer due diligence. And so on through parts 3A, part 7, part 3 reporting obligations, part 4, and so on. So you can see at once what SourceData allows you to do is not just look at a particular compliance source, but see which particular aspects of a compliance source inform not just obligations, but sub-obligations, and if we scroll a little bit higher, alerts. This is the second piece, because if we dive into this, you can see this particular amending act has now been in effect, and you can see that through the search for something like anti-money laundering, you can begin to understand it's not just the obligations that are caught by the particular search term, but also the alerts as well, and which particular legislation are driving those alerts. Now from there, let's look at the regulators. So if we wanted to have a look at which particular aspects of our content are overseen by a particular regulator, this is the way in. So if we click on AUSTRAC there, what this will do is do a search of the content in our database to see which particular obligations, sub-obligations, and alerts are caught within the AUSTRAC regimen. So by looking at the content of the subscription, you can see what AUSTRAC oversees through the various compliance sources that we inform our content with. Over and above the Act, you can see a variety of different financial crime guides, aspects of illegal wildlife tracking, NDIS fraud prevention guide, Australia's mutual banking, money laundering and terrorism financing risk assessment, and so on. So depending on what kind of information you're looking for, SourceData is a reliable and effective tool that will allow you to drill down and see the interrelationship. It can often be fairly complex between the obligations that we provide you, the alerts that we provide you, the compliance sources that inform them, and the regulators that oversee them. I hope this has been useful. As I mentioned, my name is Michael Nelson. If you'd like more information in relation to SourceData, perhaps a demonstration, please reach out to LexisNexis. We look forward to hearing from you.